This is what Gaddafi said in an interview before he was.
No demonstration at all in the streets. No one against us. Against me for what? Because I am not president.
But then
They love me, all my people with me. They love me all.
But if they do love you,
They will die to protect me, my people.
And this is what happened a few days later.
Overnight, the body of the dictator was placed on the ground for all in the city of Misrata to see for themselves.
Those same people he said loved him, those same people he said were on his side, they pulled him by his hair through the streets and then they beat him up mercilessly before they... But for you to understand why Gaddafi ended the way he did, we have to first of all acknowledge why he came into power in the first place. The incredible things he did once he came into power, the terrible things he might have done, and of course, how the West painted him such that he was a villain in the eyes of not just the rest of the world, but to his own people. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about Gaddafi. You see, first of all, we need to go back in time. Yeah, Libya, before it became a country. First of all, note this. Libya is an Islamic state, and how it is governed is heavily dependent by its religion. Long before anybody knew the name Gaddafi, we first of all knew the name King Idris bin Mohammed. Yeah, this guy ruled Libya as its monarchy, its first and only monarch. He was the grandson of the Sunnisi Muslim Sufi order. These guys ruled in northern Africa and they were of the Sunnisi tribe. This meant that King Idris did not acquire his position because he was the best person fit to rule. Instead, it was because of his bloodline and his lineage. Honestly speaking, regardless of all this, the guy actually did an incredible job, because as of that time, Libya was not yet a country. It was just one of those states with other bigger states fighting for its resources. We're talking of places like the Ottoman Empire, Italy, and of course the Western world. So Idris had to navigate between these houses of power, and what he would do normally is he would take fruit baskets to them. Anybody that was in charge as of that time, he would take fruit baskets to them, and then he would try to be on their better sides. And this was the same thing when World War II came along, because Libya still had to survive, or to be honest, the wealthy people in Libya had to survive. Yes, because of this guy's ability to be able to lick boots, he actually got into very incredible positions. In fact, Italy and the Ottoman Empire were like, yo, how about we put Idris here as the one in charge of Libya? You know, there's one particular part of Libya with a lot of power. Let's put him in charge here. They were like, yeah. And so Idris became the emir of Cyrenaica, which was, as of the time, one of the 3 major provinces of Libya. And then 1948, 1949 came, and the UN, they were like, yo, how about we'll allow Libya become a state of its own, you know, that kind of thing. These people here, they look like they can rule themselves. And then the Ottoman Empire and then Italy as of that time, just careful, yeah, it was just already around World War II, you know, and they were like, who are we going to put in charge? And they looked at each other, and then they looked towards Libya. They were like, oh, there's one particular guy that used to come and give us fruit baskets that year. What's his name again? Yeah, Idris. That guy looks good. He looks fit to rule. Libyans, what do you guys think about that? The Libyans were like, of course, let him rule. Just so we're clear, when I'm saying Libyans, I'm talking of the wealthy party in Libya. Just when this guy was carrying fruit baskets to the ones outside, he was also carrying fruit baskets to the wealthy families back home. And everybody agreed that he should rule. And so that was how King Idris came into power. And the moment he came into power, the first thing he did was he tried to consolidate his power as much as possible. He took total control over the army and most of the parliament. He only gave power to the wealthy people and, you know, those influential tribal men back home. The ones that he needed to fruit basket to as of those times. They were the ones he gave power. And this was where the problem began, because these people in turn were not allowing the rest of Libya to enjoy these benefits. The poor people were still suffering. Roads were not built. People were still getting sick. And this is when Gaddafi got into the picture. You see, as of that time, Muammar Gaddafi was a young officer. He was like, 26, 27 that time. And he could see the way his people were suffering. And it made his blood hot, especially because Idris was licking the boots of the Western world. But the truly breaking point was when oil was discovered in 1959 in Libya. This was when Libya started to grow as a country. But instead of the king to develop the country as a whole, you know, he kept on giving power and money to only the wealthy families and of course a bigger share of the cake to the Western powers. Yeah, Muammar Gaddafi was not going to have it, and so he called his other mates and he was like, yo, boys, come, let's talk a bit. And they sat and they talked, and he was like, why is the king doing this? We're not in support of this. You know what? If the king really needs foreign aid, why can't he go to those Arab nations? After all, they are our brothers, they will help us. And they were like, yeah, we don't like it. He must be having plans. Yeah, he's trying to sell our nation to them. And so they connived in the night. And they're like, let's kick his ass off the throne. Yeah, let's kick his ass off the throne. And how were they going to do it? Gaddafi suggested that they waited, and so they did. They waited for when King Idris was vulnerable, and of course the time came. You see, King Idris had an injury with his leg and flew all the way to Turkey for medical attention, and this was when Gaddafi struck. When King Idris had left, he left his nephew in charge, and of course his nephew was not any better. This brother was still just distributing the wealth for wealthy people and the Western powers. Yeah, Gaddafi was not having this. Honestly speaking, the entire coup happened in shorter than you might think. It happened within 2 hours. They took over the airports, they took over the major cities, they took over the radio stations. Yeah, they took over everything, and Gaddafi sat on the seat. Immediately they called Idris. They were like, yo, King Idris. Yeah, sorry, Idris, you ain't king no more. Idris was like, what are you saying? Say, yeah, there's a coup in your country, and you've been forced out of the throne. King Idris was like, it's impossible. They cannot do this to me. And he was like, put Gaddafi on the phone, and Gaddafi took the phone. He was like, yo, Gaddafi, you're my boy. What are you doing over there? Gaddafi was like, who's your boy? Who's your boy? Yeah, don't come back to this country. I will advise you. If you come back, you might be... And Idris took the advice and never went back to Libya. In fact, he went all the way to Egypt seeking asylum, and then trying to, coerce the Egyptian government to help put him back on his throne in Libya. Yeah, Egypt was like, we try our best, but yeah, nobody was collecting power from Gaddafi. Gaddafi held power strong. The first thing Gaddafi did the moment he got into power was fulfill the promises he said he would do. Yeah, he ensured education became free for the entire nation. He ensured healthcare became free for the entire nation. And of course, if you were going to get married, he would sponsor not just the wedding, but give around $2,500 to $5,000 to the newly wedded couple. Yeah, there was also housing accommodation for every citizen, regardless of class. Yeah, Muammar Gaddafi was not having his citizens on the streets. It was one of those nations where you not see a poor man on the streets. Everybody had a roof over their heads. Education literacy increased from around 23% to around 80% within the 40 years of his rule. Honestly speaking, Muammar Gaddafi pampered his people. He pampered them a lot. But while he did that, he also had certain conditions for all this milk he was giving them. For example, nobody was allowed to talk against him in his government. Nobody was allowed to have suggestions about his government. Political institutions were dissolved. Political parties were dissolved. Anybody that said anything against Gaddafi's rule were tortured, and sometimes in secret. Even though you had free education, you were not allowed to speak against his method of rule. You were just allowed to shut up and become better. Of course, women were allowed into certain aspects of the growth also. Many of them became doctors, medical practitioners, and all that. And honestly, Libya was doing well for itself as of the time, aside all the torturing aspects of things. In fact, there was an incident where 1,200 inmates of a prison were complaining about how the living conditions were. Muammar Gaddafi said, oh, you guys don't like your prison. And all of them were gone. Now, you would think that what he did to his people was terrible. What he did outside to show the West that nobody could mess with him was a lot worse. Like I said, Libya at its heart is still an Islamic state. And I don't think you guys know this, but there's this silent beef between the Western world and then those Islamic states. And then Muammar Gaddafi, oh boy, this guy took a huge chunk of that beef very personal. In 1980s, thereabouts, there was this bomb boom that happened in Berlin. Yeah, Muammar Gaddafi was responsible for that. That killed about 3 people, and then over 200 were wounded. And then, as if it was not bad enough, he went to hide the person that was responsible for it. See the blow up that happened of Pan American 747 over Lockerbie that ended over 240 lives, which was the one that really got on the nerves of America. But Muammar Gaddafi did not stop there. This guy was on a roll. There was another explosion that happened again, a French airline where about 140 people were just like that. Like, this guy was trying to revenge for all the years before he came into power, all the things that happened to Libyans, and then he was just pouring it out on the West. That stuff was even little. He started sponsoring other states. Of course, there were a lot of good things he did, like instead of lending them money when they needed cash for different things in their economy, he gave them the cash for free. But more than that, he ensured he sponsored states that were against the Western world. And if you were going to become a rebel leader and you're like, you know what, from today henceforth, the Western world, all of them should Muammar Gaddafi will be like, yo, come here, come and become my godson. Yeah, you need money, you need rifles, you need sponsor. Yeah, take it. But one time there was a protest outside the Libyan embassy in Britain, and then somebody within the embassy came out with a rifle and unalived a lot of people. Yeah, it was a very terrible experience. Yeah, what do you think Muammar Gaddafi did? Yeah, he took that guy and hid him immediately in Libya. It was like, godson, come over here. Do you see what I'm getting at? And so there was a lot of tension between the Western governments and, of course, Northern Africa, basically Libya. Parts that a lot of people used to gloss over. You would think that all this time that Gaddafi was doing his own, the Western governments were not doing their own. No, they were. President Reagan was like, oh, Gaddafi, you think you can hit us? Don't worry, I'ma get you back. And then he ordered certain bombings in Tripoli and Benghazi. And after the Lockerbie bombing, which was a very major issue as of that time, the US government decided to seize Libyan assets that it had in its possession. We're talking of billions of dollars gone just like that. Nobody knew of this in the press. When Egypt made peace with Israel as of that time, Muammar Gaddafi went to go and sponsor the rebels in the country that were against Israel. Yeah, you guys know that Israel and the United States and the UK, they're on friendly terms. And so anybody that was on friendly terms with the Western world, yeah, Muammar Gaddafi was against that guy. I think the really most terrifying thing the guy did as of that time, we're talking like 1979, was when he sponsored Idi Amin. For those of you that know, yeah, this guy, I'm going to talk about him in another video. Yeah, he sponsored Idi Amin with rifles, money, all those kind of things, when this guy was torturing his people for 8 years. This back and forth was happening between Gaddafi and the Western world until it happened. Yeah, 9/11. 9/11 was when the United States were like, you know what? Enough is enough. Let's show these people that we have guns. And then the Islamic world were like, oh, they're bringing out their big guns. Yeah, America brought out their big guns. And there was a lot of war that time, yeah, in the Middle East. And so Gaddafi looked at it and was like, okay, I don't think we can actually compete with the big guns these guys have. How about we keep quiet? You know what? Yeah, tell them we want to do a press conference. And so Muammar Gaddafi came out to say, yeah, I have turned a new leaf. Yeah, you know what? I'm no longer fighting with the West. And everybody was like, what? You're no longer fighting with them? Like, why you change your mind? I was like, I just want to do this anymore. They were like, are you sure it's not because of the power they are displaying in Afghanistan? I was like, oh, no. I just want peace. You know, I'm getting old. Yeah, I want peace. You know what? In fact, to show how much I want peace, I am going to dispose of my nuclear project. Everybody was like, you're disposing of the nuclear project? I was like, yeah. I'm going to drop it by the side just to prove to you guys that I'm all good. And everyone was like, well, if he's doing it, it must be all good. And he even did more. Gaddafi allowed oil companies to come back into the country. Then the families of the Lockerbie incident, yeah, he sent billions to them, yeah, in apology. And everybody was like, whoa, Gaddafi has actually turned a new leaf. And he was no longer unaliving people in his country again. Yeah, people could now talk and protest and stuff like that, which, honestly speaking, was where his fall started. Just remember that these same people had been oppressed for a long time, and all of a sudden Gaddafi was now letting them talk and say whatever they wanted to say or do whatever they wanted to do. Yeah, they are not forgetting the beef of old. They're not forgetting what he did to them. and oh boy, they were coming for his neck. Yeah, little protests became revolts, and revolts became rebel groups. And the Western world saw this and they were like, you know what? How about we send little support to those rebels in that country? And that is exactly what they did. And while Muammar Gaddafi was trying to say he had reformed, yeah, his past was coming to haunt him. After a while, Gaddafi turned back to his people and was like, wait. This rebellion they're doing is actually serious. You know what? How about I send my son to go take care of them? And so he sent his son to go and, mediate issues and all that kind of thing. And you know what I mean by mediate? We're not talking peace talk. No, they went with their pew. And then that's when Gaddafi ordered an entire city to be just because they were rebelling. However, this is where the United Nations stepped in and they were like, you know what, any force necessary, we're going to use any means necessary to ensure that Gaddafi and his troops and everything, they're out. And then the United States were like, and then UK were like, and then France were like, and these three parties, they looked at each other and they were like, you know what, we are going to help. Yeah, we're going to help with that. Yeah, especially France, because these guys, they were carrying this beef for a long time. They're like, yeah, we are going to help. And then in helping, they came and they dropped some boof on Muammar Gaddafi's army. You will think maybe it was just to stop him. After all, they had the opportunity. The moment they were going to be dropping those biscuits around the place, Muammar Gaddafi could have just gone back, which he did. His army tried to retreat, but French Air Force was not letting them, and then they destroyed and devastated his entire army. We're talking tanks gone, armored vehicles gone. Yeah, they went all the way to his Air Force base and they destroyed his Air Force. They destroyed every power that Muammar Gaddafi had at his disposal, which left this man vulnerable. And it's in that vulnerability that his fall eventually came. Even though the West said they were trying to protect the civilians of that particular city, they saw this as an opportunity to weaken Gaddafi once and for all, and they took incredible advantage of it. And this is where Muammar Gaddafi met his end. Now, the moment this guy died, Libya celebrated. Like a big part of them, they were in celebrations, they were happy and all that kind of stuff. But a few months after the entire celebration had died down, people came to one reality. Who was going to lead the country after? And this is where problem came, because a lot of rebel groups that had formed wanted to be in charge. These people were not going to drop their arms. Now they understood what power tasted like. They wanted to solidify that power. And this is where a new line of civil wars began. And the Libya today is not the Libya it used to be. There's no longer free education. There's no longer consistent electricity. There's no longer payment for marriage. There's no longer payment for having children. In fact, they even have slave markets in that place, and it is very, very terrible. Living conditions are very terrible. Libya has never been as divided and as broken as it is now. It is actually a very sorry sight to see. You know that saying, the devil you know is better than the angel you don't. Honestly speaking, I don't know, but you guys tell me in the comments what you think, and then make sure to follow on TikTok and to subscribe if you're on YouTube, and then do both. Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm bringing more stories. India Amin is coming next.